Just for science, are there still people out there that think I'm an AI voice? 'Cause if you do, I get it. Stuff's pretty advanced nowadays. Anyways, I found a couple scary stories to read you guys today. The first one's from r/nosleep from user Unalloyed Saint Trina. They came from nowhere and dragged away half the town in a single night. I'm terrified one night that they'll decide to take us too. There was no warning, no deafening noise, no brilliant flash of light. They all just appeared, hunched over, emaciated, and covered in translucent, pale red skin. Only those who stayed indoors lived to see the desert sun rise. We call it the dead tide. I was 16 when it first rolled into White Rock. I dream about that night a lot. Mom had just pulled into the driveway. Twilight faded overhead, drip by golden drip. Dad waved at her through the foyer window. She smiled, shut the trunk, gathered the groceries, and began walking towards the front door. She was so close, just a few steps away. The sun fully set. Instantly, they were there. Men, women, even children. I witnessed at least a dozen of them blink into existence on my street, but they had materialized all over town. Dad mumbled some meaningless half-words. I placed my trembling hand on the window. The glass was cold but alive, crackling with the phantom caress of static. The closest one stood motionless in the middle of the street. Ribs jutted from his clay-colored chest. The oily brown hair blanketing his upper back was tangled like a thorn bush. His eyes were gray and downcast, perpetually fixed on the sand between his gaunt feet. Then, while the rest of him stayed perfectly still, the first two fingers of his right hand began suddenly elongating, launching across the asphalt with impossible speed. Mom dropped the groceries and started to run. My pulse grew wild. Each frantic heartbeat seemed to rattle my teeth. I beckoned to her, wailed for her to run faster, but she wasn't looking. She couldn't seem to hear me. The fingers coiled up her back, curved around her neck, and latched onto her cheek, pinching her skin between a pair of long, jaundiced fingernails, the sickly fangs of a hellish viper. Her expression twisted into something feral, a raw, animalistic contortion of lips and creases. Her gaping mouth rippled, but I heard no scream. Then, like a fishing line being reeled in, the fingers retracted. The force ripped her off her feet. She was briefly airborne. Her hip crashed against the sidewalk, but I heard no painful thump, no shattering of bone, nothing at all. Because the silence never wavers once the sun sets. That's how we came up with its name. It's an invisible current that surges through our town, swallowing everything in its path, silencing anything caught under its swell. A dead tide. Mom was dragged with such reckless effort, her body skidding across the road, and yet her skin never broke. No, her cheek stretched. Once at his side, she hung from the man's grasp like a burlap sack, her cheek skin stretching almost a foot above her jawbone. Her eyes vanished within the tinted skin, leaving a pair of black eye holes that made her face look like an empty mask. Being caught in the tide changes a person. Their skin becomes elastic, and they can't seem to bleed, no matter how roughly they're handled. Tears streamed down my cheek. The way she thrashed, the helpless ferocity of it all, it was just too much. I burst from the window and bolted towards the front door. Dad was too quick. He dashed ahead of me and barricaded the door with his body. I battered him, screamed at him to do something while slamming clenched fists into his stomach. Begged him to let me through. Eventually, exhaustion set in. I slumped to the floor and fell asleep in his arms. And while I slept, the dead tide rolled on. Dad stayed awake and watched it unfold. The pale red bodies dragged their writhing victims due south under the moonlight. They lurched together in perfect lockstep, a silent, synchronized convoy disappearing into the horizon with its human cargo. Dawn arrived. Sound made an unceremonious return. A strong wind howled across the vacant streets, lifting coils of sand from the asphalt. Far as anyone could tell, they were gone. The town was still. Everyone was desperate to leave, but no one was brave enough to be the first. Our neighbor's door slowly creaked open. Lily inched over the threshold, glassy-eyed, still in her pajamas, the navy blue ones with the cartoon circus lions on them. A few strands of frizzy brown hair hung in the air like someone had just rubbed a balloon against her head. She called out to her parents, who were both long gone by then. Jim and Denise were Mom's best friends, and Lily was a sweet, energetic girl. We knew them all very well. Everyone watched as he trudged across the asphalt, alone, confused, frightened, but unharmed. The dead tide hadn't hesitated to take children the night before. That was enough proof. Like someone had fired a starter pistol, people exploded from their homes all at once. Wild-eyed parents ushered startled toddlers into vans. The more religiously inclined fell to their knees in the street and offered clasped hands to the sky, pleading for mercy, apologizing for whatever transgression had warranted such a biblical massacre. Dad sprang into action. He leapt out the door, pushing through the mob, scooped Lily into his arms, brought her inside, and told me to keep an eye on her. We watched TV on the couch while he went back out and tried to control the hysteria. "We can't just leave," I heard him shout. "There have to be others like Lily. Kids, old people, the sick. Not everyone can get out of town right this second, and nobody knows for sure they're not coming back." Some listened, but most of those who could leave were leaving. Come hell or high water, though, they promised to send help when they reached Tucson. When all was said and done, only a quarter of the town remained. As the sun dipped in the sky, we fortified our locked doors with bookcases and heavy tables. A futile measure, but it gave us something to do. Right as the sun fully set, the dead tide rolled in. The red bodies materialized and lurched silently through the streets. They migrated south exactly as they had done the night before, eyes at their feet, never looking up, never attempting to gain entry to anyone's home. Dad's relief was palpable, but short-lived. Although I'm thankful for his attention to detail, his discovery was devastating. Some small part of me wishes he had never noticed. The procession was slightly larger. They were there, all of them. Everyone who had evacuated earlier that day was now walking amongst them, clay-skinned, starved, and hollow. But Mom was nowhere to be seen. The following morning, I woke up to find Dad on the couch. He was staring out the window, gently rubbing the back of a snoring Lily. I approached him carefully. There was a cold emptiness in his bloodshot eyes that set me on edge. "Glad you're up," he said, gaze still anchored to the glass. "I'll be leaving in a bit to organize a meeting. You'll stay here and look after Lily." "What? No, I can help. I need to help." His shoulders tensed, but he didn't respond. Heat collected in the pit of my stomach. Why the hell would I stay? Just for her? She's not... His head snapped towards me. The coldness melted away, revealing something truly volcanic. "She's not what, Adam?" I considered keeping my mouth shut. I didn't. She's not ours," I shouted. The proclamation echoed through our home. Movement drew attention away from Dad. A single blue eye peeked out from the kid's chestnut curls. She sniffled, and my stomach twisted. The couch leather squeaked as she rotated herself away. Lily nestled against the cushion, pushing her face into the back of the couch like she was attempting to burrow inside the fabric. Dad sighed. He stood, tucking the fleece blanket around her before turning back to me. "Listen, there is no ours and yours. There's just us. We're all one big, unified thing. Caring for her is just another way of caring for all of us." I nodded. A bitter smile crept across his lips. He was about to pass by, but he paused. His breaths were heavy. "You know what? I think Mom taught me that." Dad and the other survivors convened in a small amphitheater where stage plays had been performed before the tide. After some deliberation, everyone agreed that the most logical next step was to involve some outside authorities. We'd lost our chief of police that first night, as well as a sizable chunk of our officers, but the few who remained knew the proper channels to contact the Tucson PD. I mean, who knows? Might end up being overkill. Someone outside of White Rock must have noticed people are missing. There was a brightness in his voice, a tenuous optimism. I clung to it. The sun set. The tide rolled in. For a while, the night was silent. I woke up to a series of piercing screams erupting from the guest bedroom. Lily was having a night terror, the first of many. I threw a pillow over my head, but it barely muffled her shrieks. Fear gnawed at my chest, lacerating throbs of pain, like my heart was pumping fiberglass instead of blood. Would the noise alert them? I imagined those fingers bursting into my bedroom and dragging me away with those sickly yellow nails. I considered what it might feel like to have my skin stretched like rubber, expanding until I eventually disappeared inside myself. But they never came, and with Dad's help, Lily settled. The following afternoon, Detective Wilms arrived at our doorstep. He was a thick man with a shit attitude and bagel crumbs adorning his unkempt mutton chops. Given his level head, it was determined that Dad would speak to the detective. He vastly undersold the circumstances, of course. All he said was that Mom and a few others had gone missing. From there, he just had to keep Wilms preoccupied until sunset. Nobody was sure what would happen after Wilms saw the dead tide. For all we knew, reports of the preternatural threat would rise through the ranks of the FBI, and White Rock would be swiftly nuked off the face of the earth in the name of containment. Even that seemed better than doing nothing, though. But Wilms proved difficult to pin down. He seemed firmly uninterested in the situation. Eyes glazed over, expression vacant, memory worse than a concussed goldfish. Despite reiterating our cover story multiple times, he kept asking questions like, "Wait, so who went missing?" The sky darkened. The scent of vanilla and burnt wood hung heavy in the foyer. Dad and Wilm stood by the window, debating who should be drafted to the Arizona Cardinals over tumblers of expensive scotch. The sun finally set. The tide rolled in. Sweat beaded on Dad's forehead. Silence descended around us like an avalanche. Wilms stared into the blackness, a blackness littered with shambling red corpses. We waited, and then he smiled. He patted his bulging gut and said, "Well, I should probably ship off. Thanks for the drink." The color dissolved from Dad's shell-shocked face. Wilms couldn't see the tide. Sidebar here, guys. Wilms better be rage-baiting right now. Because if red, stretchy corpses are walking the street and he's like, I appreciate the drinks. I'll catch y'all later. Yeah, no, that's not okay. Anyways, let's continue. And before Dad even realized the danger, Wilms already had his hand on the knob. He flung the front door open. The smell of a storm wafted in from the night, dense and electric. Dad leapt back, throwing his arms up defensively, expecting an onslaught, but nothing came through the door. Halfway through the threshold, Wilms paused, cocking his head. I'll get back to you about," he thought for a moment, eyes darting around the room, "what we, discussed today." The door slammed shut. Wilms stumbled to his car, got in, and drove off. He almost hit one of the red bodies, but at the last possible moment, they launched back, flattened themselves onto the road, and narrowed their frame. The car sped right over them. A second later, they jerked upright and continued trudging south. We never saw Wilms again. Time, much like the tide, proved relentless and indifferent. Despite feeling frozen at the epicenter of some quiet apocalypse, the minutes still ticked forward. Day turned to night, night turned to day, life went on, so eventually we did too. Lily moved in with us and became my unofficial stepsister. Dad continued to help coordinate survival efforts, and the town as a whole abandoned the notion that anyone on the outside could help us. Dad spoke with Wilms on the phone a few days after his visit. He had no recollection of White Rock, none at all, and when he finally convinced Wilms to come back a second time, the detective claimed he couldn't figure out how to get there. Dad pleaded for him to elaborate, but he got flustered and hung up. Friends and relatives were much the same. We couldn't reach them by telephone. They'd remember us, but that memory would quickly turn out to be both vague and fleeting. One moment they'd understand who they were talking to, the next they'd have no fucking clue. And more often than not, that amnesia evoked some disturbing rage. Calls would frequently end with the person on the other line blaring profanities, sobbing uncontrollably, or screaming like a banshee. It was like we were on the precipice of complete erasure, but we hadn't been pushed over the edge yet, and that in-betweenness seemed to incite a primal fear for those outside of White Rock. A strange new normal developed while we waited for the tide to finally pass. Lily and I grew close. Memories were made. Peaceful dinners with weak laughter. Pleasant soccer games under the Arizona sun. Movie nights with blinds hanging low on every window. Things certainly weren't perfect. The tide wore on everyone's psyche differently. Some freely gave themselves to it, left their homes in the night, silently and usually without warning, never to be seen again. Didn't happen often, but it happened enough times to earn a slang term. It was a clumsy euphemism, but most felt it was more appropriate for polite conversation than stating the blunt truth of the matter. "Oh, you haven't heard about Mary?" Couldn't take it anymore. She got sunk. Lily's night terrors became progressively more intense. Sometimes they'd last for hours. Other times she'd make these bizarre noises. Rhythmic clicks and grunts that would turn her cheeks red from how vigorously she would vocalize. Hundreds of nights came and went without incident. There was never any siege, and as long as people remained inside, nobody was harmed. Call me naive, but the phenomenon started to seem more like a natural disaster than an apocalypse. We were just in the wrong place at the wrong time and got swept up into something we could never understand. 2 years later, and we're still here. Not much has really changed. Until tonight. Dad was lounging on the couch with a book. Lily tends to get a little stir-crazy before bed, so I was doing my best to wear her down. She loves playing the flying trapeze. "Okay, now cross the tightrope," I called out. She tiptoed across a line of ties I'd laid on the floor, wobbling, feigning nervousness. Being the rambunctious little goblin she is, Lily pretended to slip from the tightrope, and she came crashing to the floor. After I tended to her fake injuries, she deemed herself ready to return to circus life, which involved her doing manic cartwheels around the living room. I smiled, cheering her on. There was a rush of emotion behind me. Dad leaned over and whispered something in my ear. "Get your sister upstairs, now." I turned to him. A familiar emptiness had hollowed out his bloodshot eyes, but he wasn't looking at me. Nausea skittered up the back of my throat. Despite the painful apprehension, I followed his gaze. He was staring out the window. The red bodies were marching due south in perfect lockstep, same as they had every other night, but with one key difference. Their eyes weren't fixed on the ground. Their heads were upright, and they were shifting side to side, still in absolute synchrony with each other. Left to right, right to left, left to right. Air fled violently from my lungs. "Jesus Christ," I muttered. "Don't think about it. Just go and try to act calm. I'll start barricading the doors." I staggered to my feet. All right, kiddo, time for bed." Lily tumbled out of a cartwheel, panting from exertion. Did you see how many I did?" I nodded, grabbed her hand, and guided her up the stairs, careful to keep her pointed away from the window. Much as I tried not to look, I could still see them in the corners of my vision. Their starved red bodies marched down the street, but their ravenous gray pupils followed Lily's every movement. Even when she was upstairs, away from any windows. And if you looked really, really closely, you could see their fingers vibrating in the moonlight. We're not gone. We're all still out here, and the tide's shifting. Please, for the love of God, remember us. Wow, Unalloyed Saint Trina serving up another banger. That was so good. And Saint Trina, I know you're watching this, and I know this was just posted 6 days ago, but I really hope you're working on part 2, because I can't wait. Anyways, the next story is also from r/NoSleep from user EverBlackDeathMask. My estranged mom asked me to help her move. What I found inside was deeply disturbing. I never had the best relationship with my mom growing up. When people hear that, they usually assume she must have done something horrible. But the truth is a lot more complicated than that. She's not a bad person per se, but rather a victim of circumstance that didn't know how to ask for help. My father walked out on us when I was just 10 years old. I don't remember him leaving. One day he was there, then the next he was gone without a trace. If there was a note or an explanation of some kind, my mom never told me. All that was left behind, according to her, was an insurmountable debt and the uncertainty of raising a child all alone. That kind of pressure is enough to cripple anyone mentally and physically. Unfortunately, my mom was no different. In the years following my dad's departure, my mom found creative ways to remind me that I would amount to nothing like he did. In her drunken stupors, she would hurl insults at me and blame me for her life going down the drain. Wow, guys, Mother of the Year. When I turned 18, I wasted no time packing up the few possessions that I had and getting out of Dodge. For the next 8 years, we didn't reconcile or speak to one another. But all of that changed when my phone lit up with her name last month. I almost declined the call. After all, what exactly did we have to talk about? I wasn't exactly in the mood to deal with whatever baggage she had, but a morbid curiosity got the best of me. "What do you want?" I answered. Is that how you answer the phone these days? For you it is. Years of pent-up bitterness poured out of me. Lose my number. I have nothing to say to you. Wait. It sounded like she was choking up. I'm sorry for everything, Jordan. I was such a terrible mother. You deserved better. The silence that followed was not only awkward, but deserved. How exactly was I supposed to respond to that? Yes, I deserved better treatment, and she could have been better herself, but now that I was older, I understood why she was the way she was. After I had spent an uncomfortable amount of time listening to her cry, I spoke up. Listen, Mom, I don't want to talk about this right now. I'm busy. When can we talk about it? Is there ever going to be a good time to talk? Not really, I admitted with a sigh. Work keeps me pretty busy these days. I have my own life to live. I understand, she sniffled. Listen, kiddo, I don't have much time left. Cancer is a bitch, and it's taking its toll on me physically. I need your help with downsizing. The house is so full these days. Can you please come by and help me move some things out of the house? I can't reach the basement anymore. I hesitated. Why did she want my help? Couldn't you hire some movers or something? I could, but I want to talk to you. About everything. I'll even pay you. I rolled my eyes at the proposition. How much? How does $500 sound? $500 was $500. That's money that I couldn't turn down, especially with how dire my financial situation was proving to be, despite all the hours I was putting in at my job. Okay, I'll help, I caved. When do you need me to come over? Great, thank you so much. I appreciate the help. I could hear the relief in her voice. Come by whenever you have a day off. I don't want you to overwork yourself. We exchanged goodbyes, and then I hung up the phone. A few days later, I was driving toward a house that I swore I'd never step foot in again. When I pulled into the driveway, I knew immediately that something was off. The grass on the lawn was well above knee height, and the weeds climbing the siding were nearly vines. Yellowed and fray envelopes overflowed the mailbox. It looked like one more piece of mail would have made it explode. It was odd that the property had been seemingly pushed to the wayside. If she had been able to call me, then surely she could have contacted a neighbor or someone else who could assist her with these things, right? I couldn't help but feel a little guilty. Had it been a mistake to keep her out of my life while her health deteriorated? I grabbed as much of the mail as I could fit into my arms and crossed the jungle that was the front lawn toward the front steps. The steps were an uneven, cracked mess, and I nearly busted my head when I tripped on the second-to-last stair. Thankfully, I was able to use the railing to catch my balance, but the mail scattered everywhere across the front porch area. I rang the doorbell and began picking up the mail. Despite it taking me a considerable amount of time to gather the mail, nobody had answered the door. Weird. I rang the doorbell again. I waited a few minutes, but there was still no answer. My eyes wandered toward one of the windows and noticed that the curtains were drawn. From what I remember, my mom had always been one to let sunlight in, especially when we would deep clean the house on Sundays, so why were the curtains drawn in the middle of the day? Thinking that maybe she had forgotten the time and dozed off, I set the mail down and called her phone. The persistent ringing echoed from the depths of the house. I listened to her phone ring over and over again, but all my calls went unanswered. Growing more concerned, I pounded on the door and called out to her repeatedly. Nothing. Realizing I wasn't getting anywhere, I ventured toward the side of the house. Unlike the front window, the view through the side windows weren't blocked by curtains, but by clutter. From where I stood on the lawn, I could see piles of various items ranging from boxes and newspapers to decades-old furniture and garbage. My heart broke at the sight. "Jesus, Mom, what happened to you?" I muttered, hopping over the rusted, chain-link fence into her backyard. I walked up the stairs to the patio and immediately got chills at what I saw. The back door was cracked open, a couple of inches wide. I approached it and was greeted by a horrendous smell that invaded my nostrils. I audibly gagged and pulled my shirt over my nose to shield it from the malodorous household. Gripping the door with one hand, I shoved the mountain of junk obstructing my path with the other. It took a number of attempts, but eventually it all toppled onto the floor. The gap had widened enough for me to squeeze through. I sidled my way through, my body pressing against more junk as I forced my way inside. The way my feet squelched beneath me made it feel like I was stepping through a field of rotten pumpkins. I had to hold my breath. Even with using my shirt as a makeshift mask, the smell was overwhelming. Years of accumulating mold and spoiled food had transformed my childhood home into a place more akin to a landfill than a home. "Mom?" My voice traveled through the house, but there was still no indication that anybody was home. How could she live like this? The more I wandered through the house, the more bewildered I became. It was hard enough to navigate where I was in the labyrinth of seemingly endless garbage, but the sights were even harder to stomach. In the living room, where my mom had on numerous occasions screamed at me for ruining her life, sat pillars of miscellaneous magazines and newspapers that extended to the ceiling like Jenga towers. In addition to molded food and other than debris, broken glass from no longer operable lamps were scattered across the floor. What made me most nauseous, though, wasn't the narrow pathways from all the junk, or even the couple pounds of hamburger meat infested with flies that was in the kitchen sink. It was the spider webs. They were everywhere. I hate spiders. Ever since I was a kid, they've terrified me. One of my earliest memories was finding a spider on the bathroom floor and having to have my mom kill it with a newspaper. So when I saw the webs go from tiny, membranous piles in corners to being complete, thick tapestries draped across entire pieces of furniture, I nearly left right then and there. But I couldn't leave my mom alone to fend for herself in the stump. "Hey Mom, I'm here." My cracking voice was accompanied by the sound of something skittering on the ceiling. My attention drew upward, and I saw spiders crawling slowly amidst the cracks and exposed beams. Trembling, I moved out from my place in the kitchen to the stairway. Ascending the stairs was not the same effortless task it had been growing up. In fact, it was incredibly difficult. The slippery plastic bags and the random cardboard boxes that adorned nearly every individual step made climbing the stairs feel like an obstacle course from hell. After minutes of cautiously choosing my steps wisely, I made it to the top of the stairs. To the left of me was the door to my mom's room. It was exactly how I remembered it, seemingly untouched by time or filth. I grabbed the doorknob and turned it slowly. I pushed the door, its hinges creaking as it revealed a sight I wasn't expecting. The room was clean. It wasn't spotless, but it was cleaner than the previous areas of the house I had been in. But that wasn't what grabbed my attention. On the other side of the room, sitting in a recliner, was my mom. Buried beneath layers of dust was her figure sitting idly in a reclining chair by the window. "Mom, what's going on?" I crossed the room toward her. The closer I got, the more frail she became. When I nudged her, I thought she would awaken from the nap she had dozed off in, but that's not what happened. I wish that's what would have happened. Instead, her limp body turned to where it faced me, and I nearly screamed. Her eyes were gone. The skin on her face was a discolored mesh of tissue. Her phone was resting on her lap. She was dead. Oh my God. I backed away, tears threatening to fall. Had I been here any earlier, maybe she would still be here. The woman who I had wished would suffer for how she had treated me when I was younger was no longer here. I couldn't take back how I felt, what I said, or what I did. Not now and not ever. All I could do was sit on the bed and cry. I had talked to her earlier that week. I swear I had. If I hadn't talked to her, who would I talk to? Jordan, where are you? It was my mom's voice. Excuse me? I felt a creep chill up my spine. My eyes darted from my mom's body to the doorway. There was no way that the woman whose deceased body I'd seen with my own eyes had called out to me. Honey, I can't find you. The house is so full these days. I didn't answer. I held my breath as I heard noises coming from somewhere downstairs. I pushed myself upright and listened to the mattress springs settle behind me with a muffled series of pops. Inching my way towards the door, I peered around, but didn't see anyone. Jordan, answer me right this instant. The voice had grown irritated. It was the voice I'd been accustomed to associating with my mom for years. Hearing it again filled me with a dread I hadn't felt since childhood. I didn't heed the command. Instead, I stood in the doorway and listened to the voice grow angrier and closer. Don't make me come up there. This time, the voice became more guttural. I covered my mouth to prevent myself from responding. The sound of shifting clutter and scampering up the stairs filled the house. I retreated to the bedroom, but the floor creaked beneath me, giving me away. Jordan, I know where you are. With a nightmarish rhythm, its abdomen swayed as it stalked forward up the stairs. It's been so long since I've seen my boy. Paralyzed, I couldn't move. I could only stare at the clusters of beady, animalistic eyes that reflected back at me. Beneath them was a face I recognized all too well. It was my mom. Her cheeks sagged and stretched around fangs that clicked together and glistened with saliva. Jointed legs sprawled from beneath, twitching at the slightest disturbance of the chitinous shell that trailed behind it. Come give me a kiss. The thing, proclaiming to be my mom, clacked its fangs and advanced toward me with patience. I recoiled and shook my head, refusing to give in to this thing's wishes. Go to hell, I declared, rushing toward the staircase railing and vaulting over. The cardboard boxes beneath broke my landing as a wailing, chittering shriek reverberated from above. With an unsettling fluidity, the monstrous silhouette descended the stairs. I barreled through the garbage on the stairs, frantically scrambling back the way I'd come. You get back here right now, Jordan. I didn't look back. I kept pushing forward through all the junk. The house became more suffocating with every step I took. Piles of trash trapped my shoes and made it disorienting to know where I was. Jordan! My heart thudded against my ribcage as I burst into the kitchen and felt my feet become immediately stuck. I had failed to realize that the surrounding area was engulfed in overlapping layers of webs, wall to wall, cabinet to cabinet, even the floor. The room had become a trap. I jerked and wiggled, but my movements were no use. Elastic and silky webbing clung to my hands like glue. Hysterically, I kept trying to yank myself free, but the more I struggled, the more adhesive it became. Excuse me, little sidebar here, guys. Super unlucky to be terrified of spiders in this situation. Why couldn't the OP have been, scared of heights, or snakes, or taxes? Anyways, let's continue. Above me, I heard it scamper before dropping into view from the ceiling. With a thud, it flexed its legs and carried itself toward me. My mom's face had been consumed entirely by ravenous intent. Got you. The webs around vibrated with every restricted movement I made. I kicked to keep it at bay, but a second later, it lunged. I backed my head away as its fangs snapped inches from my face. The impact sent me to the floor, and I felt my body sink deeper into the lattice of webbing around me. Panic coursed through me as I struggled, but the silk clung to my clothes and skin. It pulled me down like a fish being reeled in. The creature adjusted its position and stared down at me with longing and hunger. Jordan, Mom has missed you so much. The voice rumbled through the silk. The fangs lowered themselves toward me with an eager precision, but before they could connect, I used what remaining strength I had to pull my hands up and defend my face. They sliced through the webbing, allowing me to free my hands. I kicked and pushed the creature off me. My newfound freedom allowed me to grab a nearby piece of glass from the door. Turning to face it once more, I stabbed it into the closest eye. With a horrific shriek of pain, it darted toward the wall and retreated up along it. Jordan, how dare you treat your mother this way, you unappreciative brat? My legs burned with adrenaline as I struggled against the sticky webbing and hurried toward the back door. It was still cracked from earlier, but I would have to push my way through the same garbage. Not even bothering to look back, I threw myself into the gap shoulder first and powered my way through. I moved as quickly as I could, scraping my skin against the piles and tearing the last strands of webbing clinging to my body. Sunlight peeked through the other side like a beacon of hope, but before I could reach it, something gripped my shoe. I turned to see my mom holding on tightly with her fangs, desperate to drag me back into the house. "Let go," I pleaded as I kicked repeatedly. My foot squished with every blow that struck an eye or some part of her. A resounding crack filled the air as my foot connected with a fang. "Get back here," she screamed. I stumbled out onto the back steps and ran faster than I ever have in my entire life toward the fence. After scaling it, I bolted toward my car, hopped into the driver's side, and floored it out of the neighborhood. I never went back. I'm not sure how long I drove for, but when the adrenaline had worn off, I pulled into the parking lot of a grocery store and called 911. The police were hesitant to come check it out initially, but they eventually relented. They found my mom's body in the webs, but they never found the monster wearing my mom's face. That's something I don't really like to think about for too long. What I do think about is the moment I opened that door and saw my lifeless mother sitting in that chair. I don't know how long she sat there for or how much pain she was in. All I know is that she died alone and I wasn't there. I can't change that. People talk about her now like she was nothing more than a hoarder, but I don't think about the house when I think about her. I just think of my mom. Everblack death mask? That was something else. That was really good. I'm thinking now maybe I should put a trigger warning for arachnophobia at the beginning of this video though. Anyways, if you guys made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe as it does help me out greatly. Huge shout out to my channel members, thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you do want to further support the channel, that link's in the description. However, it is not at all required, completely optional. With all that said, I will see you tomorrow. Peace.